pretty self-explanatory. 2 arrows should work. Now, this is a pretty cool quote. After slaking it, mix your mortar if using pit sand in the proportions of 3 parts of sand to 1 of lime. Who wrote it? This guy, Roman architect, around 2,000 years ago. Indeed, when you look at these buildings from that era, it really does speak to the robustness and longevity of using natural materials. But I think I'm speaking to people who are already on the same page here. So I'm Stephen Moller. I have a small company called Limewave doing natural plastering. So the question might be, what is natural plaster? In my case, it's taking either clay on site or lime, mixing with sand and a bit of fibre, and that's a very basic overview of what a natural plaster is. It should have no toxins in it, and it's got a much lower embodied energy in the production than cement or other synthetic plasters. And if you can't have your whole wall built of earth, then maybe you can have a compromise here. So I'm just going to show you a few things what I've been up to, and give you an insight into what goes on for me. We've got beautiful raw materials there down in Takaka, lots of lime deposits. We've got a lot of lime deposits throughout New Zealand. The lime binder I use, you can acquire from farm shops, and it's produced in Tikuiti by Greymonts, and they also have a production down in Southland somewhere. And then you've got McDonald's lime over in Havelock North. So through these shops, and even placemakers, you can buy the lime binder, which is also called hydrated lime. And then we've got clay. So clay, we don't have a clay industry, a clay plaster industry here. It does exist in Western Europe, but here we have to make it from the clay we find, preferably as close to site as possible, sometimes on the building site. And there's normally a choice. If you drive around, you see orange, greys, reds. We've even got a white kaolin clay from far north. So we've got a lot of choice there. It brings me to a little case study this from last year out here in West Auckland, Kumiu. Got the excavator, the digger there to get some nice clean fatty clay and put it aside for us. And we started processing it. I've just got a very basic processing unit that I made myself. It's a 200 litre drum with some 4x2 screwed on the top, and you can put a double hand mixer straight on that and set it going. Crumble the clay into water in the barrel and just leave it running. And the clay, a lot of the clay breaks down and ends up being this clay slurry here, which you can then pass through a sieve, depending on how fine you want it for the plaster you've designed. And that's called a clay slip. So the clay slip is the binder in the clay plaster. And as I mentioned before, there's lots of different clays everywhere, and they all have different characteristics. So it's about the expansiveness of clay. It'll crack. We see cracks there. That's a very expansive clay, and some clays are not so expansive. So you've got to mitigate that expansion by putting aggregates and a bit of natural fibre in. And I normally do about sort of 4 within a sort of spectrum of ratios on the substrate, and whatever performs best gets used. So, why would you want clay on the interior of your building? It's hygroscopic. So hygroscopic means it regulates your climate. It regulates the humidity in the room. And at a bit of a nerd here, at a microscopic level, you've got clay, which is actually 2 platelets. And you've got a water molecule comes along here, and it accepts the water molecule, when there's moisture in the room. When the room starts drying out again, it releases the water molecule and then it dries off, the room dries off again. So that's all going on while you sleep. It doesn't need any servicing. So you can alter the aesthetic of clay as well, clay plaster, depending on the clay colour you've got, and also depending on the sand you put in. So pigments as well can alter the colours, and then of course it's down to the texture. Do you want smooth? You can create very, very smooth, almost glass-like with, say, certain types of Japanese clay plastering, or very textured. And you can also use it as a substrate to put your natural paints on. Casein or cellulose-based natural paint. Yeah, so it's vapor permeable, no toxins, local source. In that case, it was very extreme. It was right outside the building. This is another job. The client bought this house already with an existing 10 to 15 millimeter layer of clay plaster on the interior, but it was coated with a casein natural paint. Casein is milk protein mixed with stone powders. It's very basic. And from his childhood, he grew up in a house that was just raw clay plastered. And that's what he wanted here. So he stripped off the paint, and some of the clay came down. Working with machines, it's inevitable. We were able to separate out the clay from the paint, and we rehydrated the clay plaster there and needed no more mixing. The ratio was already there. It was already proven that it works. So, and then we just fixed all the damages and put these nice curved rebates on the wall. And yeah, he was quite happy with that. So that's reusable. A piece breaks out of the wall, you rehydrate it, you put it back in, and that's infinite. You can do that as many times as you want. There's nothing stopping you doing that. So on the other hand, lime plaster is not water soluble, but it does make it more practical. It sets, and it makes it more practical to protect the outside of a building and interior. So just a look at some substrates that we can put natural plasters on. So, if you've already got jib board, like in the case of this, this is a foyer on Beaumont Street, downtown, 100 Beaumont Street. You can just walk in there and have a look if you want. This is a 3-toned lime plaster on that feature wall there. I also did the ceiling there, and there's also some very long high walls going in either direction to the entrance, exit areas. So that could also be a clay plaster. With a bit of a key coat onto jib, you can apply either. This is in a barn project I was on. We're retrofitting barn space. This is upstairs. That's a very old jib wall that we've put a lime plaster on. No pigments, just as the colour comes, lime and the sands we used. So yeah, this is also just a freestanding feature wall jib on timber frame. The spec was to have the colour of Uluru, which is Ayers Rock in Australia. So it took a lot of pigment, and in the end the client wanted it even more intense. So we put linseed oil on it, and that really brought out how oil can really bring out the intense colour of something. There was also lots of other walls. We did it in a more natural off-white. It's another substrate, cement sheet or hardy board. There's two plasters going on here. This is just like an open porous lime plaster, which helps with having that a hygroscopic effect of taking up the steam after a shower and then releasing it when the room dries out a bit more. This down here is, as Ben mentioned before, that's Tadelact, which is the Moroccan lime plastering technique for creating water-resistant surfaces. Lots of fine layers, quite labour-intensive, but beautiful. This is very much similar type of plaster, and that's down on Commerce Street in the Daily Bread, the large premises. I did the counters there and some of the walls. A bit more humble here, a little hempcrete 20 square metre house on Whaihanga. I think that's a great industry, slowly gaining traction. We used to import it from France and Europe, the whole kit, the hemp shiv and the binder, and now it seems we can do everything here in New Zealand. So this seems like a bit of a no-brainer, doing hempcrete. This is a hempcrete house in Northland. So I only lime plastered with the owner the more sort of like high traffic practical areas. We used a Matauri Bay sand. Matauri Bay is where they pull the kaolin china clay out of the ground, and a byproduct of that is Matauri Bay sand, and it's just really great for lime plastering. It's a very light colour. And he also liked to keep the aesthetic of the hempcrete. He's a sound engineer, and the first thing we plastered was the hallway, and we did it from ceiling to floor. And then he was mortified with the reverberance of the sound, because he'd been living and working in this anechoic chamber for the last few months, and then suddenly he decided to just keep a lot of those areas as raw hempcrete. So this is in Tomarata, up just north of Auckland on the east coast. It's up on the hill, very exposed area. That's a Graham North design build. Mud brick. The owner didn't like the waviness. He didn't want to see the mud bricks, so we've plastered about a 20mm layer of lime plaster over the whole exterior to protect it, and then we lime washed it. So lime wash is taking that same lime binder, hydrated lime, and adding that we use in the plaster, but we're adding a lot more water, and we're getting it down to like a sort of a thick milk consistency, and then we're brushing it on. And we've added pigment there to give it more sort of earthen tone. If you see pictures of Greek houses, and everything's white, that's lime as it comes out of the ground. This is that same barn I showed you earlier. This is the downstairs. We've done some workshops there, and that's actually straw bale behind that. And this is now the sort of like, there's the base coat layer on the straw bale, clay plaster, and then we've put another layer on top of that, still not finished, but each workshop there's an improvement. And that's taking the clay from outside on the site. This place here is in suburban Kaitaia. It's an annex coming off the back of this bungalow here. The owner, it was in very bad condition, and the owner almost bowled it. But then someone said, why don't you retrofit it with light earth? So a local earth builder retrofitted it with light earth, and I came along and did a lime plaster on it. Yeah. So there's something retrofitted. These are some concrete block elements in a garden on an Orewa. Another concrete block project. This is a cafe, bakery in Ponsonby. They do French bakery stuff, patisserie, and when they got it, it's had all this horrible block work with acrylic paint all over it, and we completely covered it up with a very rustic sort of skip trowel look, pigmented lime plaster. This is another substrate, Itong or Hebel block. That was a house in Coromandel. We've plastered the exterior with Waikato Central Plateau sand and lime from McDonald's in Havelock North. And then also plastered the interior with a lime plaster. This was using, the owner wanted completely white, so I've gone with marble sand from Takaka. It's this amazing, pristine, perfect white marble, crushed marble sand from the top of the South Island. And then you've got hydrated lime, which is also white, so you just almost, you can't get any whiter than that. So moving away from all those substrates, but this is, these barrels are all filled with water, and I'm tipping the hydrated lime into them to like soak the lime for a few weeks before I get to the job. You don't have to do this. You can use the hydrated lime straight from the bag, but this does improve the lime at a sort of a molecular level and sort of breaks it down into, makes it a bit stronger. But all those bags are all paper, so that's all recyclable or biodegradable, and those barrels there are all food industry end of the line. And I've still got a few of those barrels at home, soaking lime, and I left some with the owner, and eventually they'll get rusty and we'll take them to the metal recycling, but we've got to do that where we can. That's one of my favourite buckets. It's seen about 100 uses now. Yeah, so it's also ex-food industry, which you can find people selling them after they've imported whatever. And this is how the sand comes quite often in a trailer or a truck, so it's just tipped straight off. There's no packaging. If we can think in advance about these things, and how can we avoid that packaging, and I do have a bit of waste, like if I've got to mask up some very expensive joinery or an object or something, or a wall, something adjacent to where I'm plastering, and it can be a bit splattery, then I do have like plastic film I use, but it scrunches down into actually a very small amount. Floors I try cover with heavy drop sheets and reusable floor coverings. But on the whole, I just sort of always looking to where I can, mitigate that waste. Yeah, so we've covered all this now. I think we're pretty familiar with it. That's about the end of my presentation. This commonly occurs when I'm chasing a colour. And I work on site, and I'm trying to find the colour that the client's given me something to match to, something natural hopefully, and I'm trying to match to it. So there's yellows and there's reds and there's blacks and there's browns, and yeah, and that's the journey. I have a lot of those. So anyway, thank you for listening, and.
Just in regard to
sorry.
Just in regard to substrates, could you apply it onto timber substrates like plywood or OSB or anything like that in existing buildings? Or
I've seen clay works quite well on plywood. It seems to be a little bit more flexible, and it's got fibre in it, so that's a little bit more flexible than lime. I'd say if the plywood is in no danger of ever getting moist, so if it's inside and the climate's reasonably dry, then
So you wouldn't have to pre-treat it or seal it with anything before applying the clay or anything?
You could seal it. Yeah, you could seal it, and then I would put like a key coat on that, and it would stick to that. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
One of your slides, I think it looks like you rendered on top of existing brick veneer. Is that correct? Or was I
Block work.
brick, a clay
Brick.
brick? I saw
Clay
one of
brick.
the slides. Looks like you rendered it on here. It's just a sample.
Shall I go back?
Do it really early on in your presentation.
It's just that it looks quite good with a deeper
You're
reveal.
showing the trials.
Yeah. Go back a bit.
That's back of the substrates now.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's the
Next one.
no, the one.
sorry.
That's that European one.
Other way.
That's porotherm brick.
Alright.
Yeah. Hello.
Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah. Okay, it's probably a bit too energy intensive, and we're importing it from overseas. But we make bricks here. Why can't we make these bricks too? You know, these are like nice thick, 15, 20 centimeter thick bricks with lots of honeycombing. There's lots of honeycombing in there if you look vertically down on there. So insulation and thermal mass, it's probably perfect for a lot of our climate here. Yeah.
Thank you.
What's the maintenance on these products on the exterior and the interior? So exterior, like how do you wash your house? And the interior, how do you get fly poo or kids' drawings off the surfaces? How long does it last before it needs to be done?
Yeah, I guess the good thing about it, I've done lime plaster on the interior before, and it's a few mil thick, and it's quite porous. And sometimes if it's something that's water based that's spilt on there, you can rinse it off quite quickly. Yeah, and you can use a soft brush and just like actually rinse water through it because it's not water soluble. Okay, and then let it dry off. Otherwise, if something's really stubborn on there, you can actually with a fine sandpaper just feather it off, and it disappears because you've got some layer to play with there. You know, it's not like a 0.5 millimeter layer of acrylic paint, and as soon as you touch it, you see damage. So, and if it works with the patina of the wall or the room, so that sort of works with a more open porous plaster. If you go with something finer, you can actually seal it. With like a carnauba wax, for example. There's a couple other waxes you could use. Yeah. Well, in an
urban environment and it was
road grime and well, I guess it comes down to how closed off has it been plaster finished, right? So if it's once again, if it's porous, then little things are going to sit in there, and then you could use a brush with just like a hose, you know, one of those triggers, but you probably wouldn't. You could water blast, but you've really got to regulate your pressure on that. You know, I mean, you know, you can grind anything away at this distance with a water blaster. So there's some. With going with natural materials, we've got to accept that, you know, we've all grown up in this world of acrylics, and everything is chemically or plastic coated. You know, the beautiful polyurethane floors, that's a layer of plastic on there. Acrylic walls, that's a low type plastic. You know, we're surrounding ourselves with plastic, and that's what we've grown up with. So we know that we can wipe all that off, and anything comes off it, but. The bad thing is there's no breathability. That's not what we're tuned for over the last few 100,000 years. Everything's been natural, and only in the last blip of time, it's all gone chemical. And us natural builders are going, we're the alternatives? Yeah. It's a hard one, because I think we do have to accept that we can't maybe not have our cake and eat it. as far as like everything's wipeable, and yeah, we need to accept that. So just quickly on the exterior, if you've lime washed your lime plaster, you know, just put another layer of lime wash on.
How often
Yep.
would that need to be done?
That depends on the road and depends on, yeah.
No, that was kind of my question, really. I mean, you know, but you're talking about, it's not going to be like painting or staining, is it? It's going to be longer term than that, surely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we looked at the beginning there at those Roman buildings, and things last a long time. Natural building.
Just one more question.
Thank you. That was super interesting again. There's a lot of clay that ends up in landfills, particularly in Auckland and any of the volcanic areas around the country. Does it have to be, can it be any type of clay, or I saw you digging up the ground in Kumeu and using that.
Yeah.
Does it have to have certain qualities, I guess, and moisture and...
It does,
Yeah.
because, and that sort of speaks to what's actually, when we say clay, you look at a pile of what we call clay, and the actual clay content is only a portion of that. The rest is silt and other sort of minerals. That's the thing that's expansive, and that's the thing that we have to work with. But yeah, I don't know sorry.
So I guess it's like really fine, like clay's really fine, right? Like super
Yep.
fine. Then you've got silt, which is a little bit bigger, and sediment
Yep.
gets a bit bigger. In Auckland, like my point was there is a lot of clay in New Zealand. Like, have you experimented with lots of those different types?
A few of them, yeah.
And like, you know,
Yeah.
backyard clay that you dig up in, I don't know, Devonport or something like that, you know?
Yeah, and it'll
That sort of
be
thing?
different on the next door neighbour's property,
Yeah.
or even a metre over that way.
And they can all be used?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
okay. Yeah.
as long as you've got that clay binder in there, and you just got to figure out the proportion.
Yeah,
So
okay.
how expansive is it? And because what we need to mitigate is the cracking,
Yep.
and that's why there's fibre in there, an aggregate to
Okay.
stop that cracking,
Yeah.
but get just the right amount of stickability. So yeah, the yellow is very, very intense. The red is not so intense. So then it would be less aggregate, a bit less fibre, but the yellow stuff more. The kaolin clay is not really expansive at all, so you might need to add something to that to help it bind. And yeah, so it is. You've got to engineer each clay to make it work as a plaster.
And there's no shortage of clay for you to use?
Seems not, but
Yeah.
I mean, here in Auckland it's everywhere, but I know there's other parts of the country where it's not. But I don't think it's ever too far down the road, And when I talk local, anywhere in New Zealand is local, when you think on a global scale. I mean, you can import this thing called American clay. Why would we do that?
Yeah.
We've got clay here, or lime plasters from Italy and Germany. We've got the materials here to work with. Yeah.
Thanks, Stephen.
Okay. Cool.
Cheers.
Yeah.